Hi everyone, this is topic 13A, respiratory system. This is the first lecture out of the two on respiratory system. Respiration. All cells of our body require oxygen and they give out carbon dioxide. So the process of respiration includes four steps. The first step is called pulmonary ventilation or breathing. Pulmonary ventilation means the movement of outside air into the lungs and the movement of air from the body from the lungs outside. Okay. The second step is external respiration. In this step, oxygen which has entered the lungs goes into blood and carbon dioxide moves from blood into lungs. The third step is respiratory gas transport. This is simply the transport of oxygen and carbon dioxide into the body via blood. The fourth and the last step is internal respiration. This is movement of oxygen from the blood vessels into the tissues and carbon dioxide in the opposite direction. That means from tissues into blood. So oxygen and carbon dioxide are always moving in the opposite directions. So what are the organs or components of the respiratory system? It starts with the nose, with which we breathe in air. The space inside the nose forms the nasal cavity. The nasal cavity continues down into the throat and is known as the pharynx. After that is the sound box, which is the larynx. Then the larynx opens into the windpipe or the trachea. The trachea splits into two branches, which are called the bronchi. The two bronchi enter the two lungs where they further divide, further branch out, and the finest branches are grape cluster-like structures. They are called the alveoli. It is at the alveoli where all the gas exchange occurs inside the lungs. This figure illustrates all the components of respiratory system. There are five main functions of respiratory system. Remember the mnemonic GASPs. G stands for gas exchange, where oxygen enters blood, oxygen enters your body, and we give out carbon dioxide. The second function is acidity. That means the blood pH is regulated. The more the amount of carbon dioxide in the blood, the higher the acidity. The third function is S for sound production. This is made possible by the larynx. Movement of air vibrates the vocal folds which are present in the larynx, and this helps us in producing a sound. Fourth is protection. As we breathe in air, along with the air there are thousands of germs that are entering. So our nasal cavity and all of our respiratory passages, they are provided with mucus, they are provided with cilia, they are provided with macrophages and all, which protect us. Last is smell, sense of olfaction. This occurs when molecules are drawn into the nasal cavity, and you remember the receptors in the nasal epithelium which take messages to the olfactory bulbs. So components of the respiratory system are divided into two parts, the upper part and the lower part. The upper respiratory tract starts from the nose, nasal cavity, pharynx, so it goes all the way up to the throat where there is pharynx. The lower respiratory tract starts with the sound box, the larynx, trachea, bronchi, and up to the alveoli within the lungs. We're going to go over the components of the respiratory system. We'll start with nose, which is the only externally visible part. The nose opens into a space inside. The opening, there are two holes which are known as the external nostrils or nares, or some people call it the nares. Then as you enter, that space is called the nasal cavity. If it's like a large room, then imagine there's a wall in the middle of the room which is dividing the room into the left and the right parts, and that wall is known as the nasal septum. Anatomy of the nasal cavity. If you imagine the nasal cavity to be a room, on one side of the room would be two doors that lead to the outside, which are the external nostrils. On the opposite end of the room would be two more doors that open to the next part inside the respiratory tract, and those two openings are known as internal nares or the choani. So nasal cavity is the entire space between the external nares and the internal nares. The nasal cavity is provided with a mucous membrane inside, and that mucous membrane has olfactory receptors. So the main function of this mucosa is to moisten the air so that dry air doesn't go inside, and the mucus there traps incoming dust, debris, and foreign particles. Now the space in the nasal cavity which is superior to the nares is called the vestibule. The wall that is dividing the nasal cavity into left and right parts is the nasal septum, and this wall anteriorly is made up of cartilage and it is posteriorly made up of bones. Continuing with the anatomy of the nasal cavity, the side walls of the nasal cavity, if you think of it as a room, this has hills and valleys. The hills are the ridges, we call them conchae or turbinates. There are three ridges: superior conchae, middle conchae, and inferior conchae. And the valleys between these ridges, that means the grooves, they are anatomically known as metases. These are passageways. And there is a superior meatus, and a middle meatus, and an inferior meatus. So function of these turbinates and metases is to increase the surface area, and it also causes turbulence, that means disturbance within the nasal cavity. It acts like a road, the speed blockers. So that means all the dust and debris which were entering, they are slowed down, and then the mucus gets the time to trap them. The floor of this room, nasal cavity, that means the bottom part of the nasal cavity, is separated from the oral cavity by a structure known as the palate. The anterior part of the palate is made up of bone. This is known as anterior hard palate, and the posterior part is muscular, so that is posterior soft palate. This figure illustrates the anatomy of the nasal cavity. You can see the turbinates and the metases in this figure. After nasal cavity is the pharynx, which is present in the throat region. So this goes from nasal cavity up to larynx, and it is divided into three regions. The superiormost part is the nasopharynx, which is behind the nasal cavity. The part after the nasopharynx, it is below the nasopharynx, is the oropharynx. This is behind mouth, and the inferiormost part is known as the laryngopharynx, and this is attached to the larynx. The oro and the laryngopharynx, these are common passageways for both air and food, while nasopharynx is exclusively for air. This figure shows the three parts of pharynx: the superior nasopharynx, the middle oropharynx, and the inferior laryngopharynx. Inferior to laryngopharynx is the larynx, which is known as the voice box. There are two functions of the voice box. The first one is it routes air and food into their proper channels. That means if food is coming down, it has to go into esophagus. If it's air that has been breathed in, it has to go into trachea. This is the one that separates the two. And the second function is it helps in voice production. Now, anatomy of larynx, it is made up of 9 cartilages. 3 of these are paired, so 3 times 2 is 6, and 3 are unpaired. 6 plus 3 is 9. The names of the unpaired cartilages are the thyroid cartilage, epiglottis, and cricoid cartilages. The paired cartilages include the arytenoids, the corniculates, and the cuneiforms. This figure illustrates the lateral view of the larynx. Continuing with the anatomy of the larynx, the thyroid cartilage, which is one of the unpaired cartilage, is the largest of the hyaline cartilage, and this protrudes anteriorly, and it is commonly known as Adam's apple. Epiglottis is another unpaired cartilage in the larynx. It is spoon-shaped elastic cartilage, and its function is to protect the opening in the superior part of the larynx. So it routes food into esophagus and air towards the trachea. So what happens when we are eating food, as soon as we are swallowing, the epiglottis would rise and it forms a lid or a covering over the opening of the larynx. So it makes sure that the food goes into esophagus. And what happens when we are distracted is that the epiglottis sometimes does not close completely, and that's why by mistake, the food goes into the respiratory tract instead of esophagus, and that's what immediately we start coughing, because the food has to be brought up and rerouted into the esophagus. The larynx also contains 2 vocal folds, which are sometimes improperly known as true vocal cords, and they have an important role in creating sounds through vocalization. The vocal cords stay open or apart when breathing, while the folds are brought closer towards each other to vibrate or oscillate for speech or singing, and this is controlled by the vagus nerve. The length, thickness, and the tension of the vocal folds affects the pitch of the voice. They are made up of stratified squamous epithelium and enclosed in mucous membranes. The vocal folds have a gap in between them, and this opening is known as glottis. There is another pair of thick membrane folds called the vestibular folds that are slightly superior to the more delicate vocal folds. The vestibular folds are commonly known as false vocal cords. So vocal folds are true vocal cords, while vestibular folds are false vocal cords, and their function is to protect the vocal folds. Together with epiglottis, the vestibular folds prevent swallowed food material from moving into the larynx. After the larynx is the windpipe, which is known as trachea. The trachea is about 4 inches long and it connects the larynx to the bronchi. The walls of the trachea have very characteristic C-shaped rings made up of hyaline cartilages. These are about 15 to 20 in number, and we call them C-shaped because these are absent on the posterior side. Could you guess why these are absent on the posterior side? Remember that on the posterior side of the trachea is the esophagus. Now the inside lining is made up of pseudostratified ciliated columnar epithelium, and the cilia moves in the opposite direction of incoming air, so it helps in expelling mucus that has already caught dust and other debris or germs. The trachea gets divided into, or it bifurcates into two, called the left and the right primary bronchi. The left bronchus would enter the left lung, the right bronchus would enter the right lung, and there's a cartilage at the point of bifurcation which is known as carina. This figure shows the C-shaped cartilage rings on the wall of the trachea, and this ring is absent on the posterior side. Instead of the C-shaped cartilage ring, the posterior side has trachealis muscle. Posterior to the trachealis muscle is the esophagus. The C-shaped cartilage rings help to hold the shape of the trachea. If you look into the lumen of the trachea, you can see the cilia protruding into the lumen. The trachea splits into the two main or primary bronchi, and these two bronchi would enter the lungs at an indented region, and this region is known as hilum, which is also a medial depression. The right bronchus is wider, shorter and straighter than the left bronchus. So the right bronchus is also the site for obstruction. If by chance something gets into your respiratory passages, it is the right bronchus which has a higher chances of getting obstructed by that. Then the primary bronchus would subdivide, would branch out into secondary or lobar bronchi. And the secondary bronchi are one per lobe. Now the right lung has 3 lobes, so there would be 3 secondary bronchi there, and the left lung has 2 lobes, so there would be 2 secondary bronchi there. And then the secondary bronchi would divide into tertiary or segmental bronchi. So the primary bronchi enter into the lungs. The lungs are paired organs in the thoracic cavity. In the middle of both the lungs is the heart. So the lungs have an apex and a base. The apex is the pointed region which is near the collarbone or the clavicle portion. This is the superior part of the lungs, while the base is the blunt part of the lungs and it rests on the diaphragm. So that is the inferior part of the lungs. Each lung has lobes. The left lung is smaller than the right lung. It has 2 lobes. It is small because it has to accommodate the heart. And on the right lung there are 3 lobes. The coverings of the lungs include serous membranes. So whenever it's a serous membrane, it's 2-layered. The outer layer is called parietal pleura, which lines the inside walls of the thoracic cavity, while the inner layer is called the visceral pleura that covers the lung surface. It clings to the lung from outside. This figure illustrates the superior, middle and inferior lobes of the right lung, which are separated by the horizontal and the oblique fissures, while the left lung shows the superior and the inferior lobe only. There is no middle lobe and there's only one oblique fissure. The top panel also shows the serous membranes, the parietal and the visceral pleura. Bronchial or the respiratory tree divisions, the conduction zone. The bronchi, primary bronchus, divides into secondary bronchus. Secondary bronchus would divide into tertiary bronchi and so on. So you see the number of respiratory passages are increasing, but their diameter is decreasing. From the trachea all the way up to the bronchi, there is cartilage in the walls so that it helps in maintaining the shape. But then when the bronchi branch into the bronchioles, they don't have cartilages. Instead, they have smooth muscle, and it is the smooth muscle that maintains their shape, maintains their diameter. So conduction zone is that set of airway passages which is just warming, humidifying and filtering air. There is no actual air exchange occurring there. The conduction zone of, including all of these passageways would deliver the air to the next part, which is the respiratory zone. So what is the conduction zone made up of? The conduction zone consists of the primary bronchi, which branch into the secondary bronchi. The secondary bronchi would branch into the tertiary bronchi. The tertiary bronchi would branch into the bronchioles. The bronchioles are usually less than 1 millimeter in diameter. And then the bronchioles would eventually branch into the terminal bronchioles. The conduction zone would transfer the air to the respiratory zone, and the respiratory zone contains the structures across which actual gas exchange occurs. And the respiratory zone consists of, first, respiratory bronchioles. These would form the alveolar ducts. The alveolar ducts would form the alveolar sacs. The alveolar sacs would form the alveoli, and it is only in the alveoli that oxygen and carbon dioxide are exchanged. This figure shows the structure of the alveoli, alveolar ducts and alveolar sacs, and you can compare the structure to a cluster of grapes. So the stem of the grapes would be the alveolar duct, one cluster of grapes would be the alveolar sac, and each individual grape would be an alveolus. That means grapes are alveoli, singular alveolus, plural alveoli. Now I just mentioned that actual gas exchange occurs only across alveoli. So what is the alveolar wall made up of? Each alveolus, that means that each grape-like structure, its wall is made up of simple squamous epithelium. It has to be simple, one layer, so that it allows this efficient gas exchange. Squamous is flat cells. And each grape is connected to the neighboring grape by an opening. These are known as alveolar pores. The alveolar pores connect neighboring air sacs. There are pulmonary capillaries, that means those really tiny thin-walled blood vessels that are covering the outer part of the alveoli. So consider a yarn that you are winding around the grape, and that is the pulmonary capillary. So on one side of this alveolar wall is air, and on the other side is the blood which is flowing in these capillaries. This figure shows you several neighboring alveoli, and they have been sliced off to show you the inside structure. You can see that the cells are squamous, they are flat. It's one layer only. Every now and then you see those purple colored macrophages. They have to be there to eat up any unwanted material there. Also, you see the alveolar pores, the opening or the connections, windows between the two grapes or the two alveoli. And each cell has a very prominent nucleus that by now you are so used to seeing. When you look at histological section of epithelial cells, you do see prominent nuclei. Going further into details in the wall of the alveoli. So the alveolar wall is made up of two types of cells, and we just give a fancy name to these cells. These cells are known as pneumocytes. So the first type of cell is called a type 1 pneumocyte, and type 1 pneumocyte is simply simple squamous epithelium, that's all. So 90% of the alveolar wall is made up of the simple squamous epithelium, which is known as type 1 pneumocyte, and all of the oxygen and carbon dioxide exchange is occurring through this layer of cells. The second type of cells are known as type 2 pneumocytes. These are secretory cells, cube-shaped, and these produce a secretion known as surfactant, which is made up of lipoprotein. So it is because of this surfactant that the alveoli can expand during inspiration after they have deflated at expiration. That means when you breathe out, the alveoli deflate. When you breathe in, the alveoli inflate. And why is it that alveoli do not collapse? It's because of the presence of surfactant. Imagine a grease-like material between the two thin layers, which would allow it to re-inflate. So surfactant is actually reducing the surface tension, and it is preventing the collapse of your airways, preventing the collapse of your lungs. In some people, such as premature infectants or very elderly people, if there is insufficient amount of surfactant being produced by the type 2 pneumocytes, the alveoli can collapse. They would fail to re-inflate after deflating, and this is known as atelectasis. Respiratory membrane. What are the components? We have gotten the idea that respiration or gas exchange is occurring between the alveoli of the lungs and the capillary, the blood inside the capillaries. So what are the components that are actually taking place in this oxygen carbon dioxide exchange? Let's start from the alveolus side. So the first component is a very thin layer of fluid that contains surfactant. After this, the second component would be the epithelial tissue, that is the simple squamous epithelium, which is making up the walls of the alveoli. The third component is the basement membrane of the alveolar epithelium. So the epithelium is resting on this basement membrane. The fourth component is the space between this alveoli and then the surrounding capillary blood vessels. The fifth component is the basement membrane of the epithelial tissue of the capillary wall, which we call as the capillary endothelium. And the sixth component is the actual capillary endothelium, which is again made up of simple squamous epithelial tissue. This diagram illustrates the 6 components of the respiratory membrane.